there's just so much negativity about Mexico and Mexicans on the other side of the border, right? That's all they get in the news is the negative stuff. So I wanted to show positive.
Every immigrant has a story of love, heartbreak, and resilience. I'm Claudio Munoz. After 30 years in the United States, I created this podcast to share the voices that once helped me survive. These stories have power, they guide, heal, and inspire, especially when you're far from home or about to leave. I share some of mine, now I want yours. We're all immigrants, those who leave, return, or dream, because being an immigrant is being intense. All right, today we have Mike Ginsburg. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Yes.
Mike is an American migrant from, I said American migrant, so obviously from the U.S. He migrated to Mexico, and he left the U.S. Looking for a new horizon, new things, made a life-changing decision, left his career, his family, everything behind, his culture. And as you can imagine, for anybody that's an immigrant, understand what I'm talking about. So big life change. And when I learned about Mike and I saw his TikTok channel and all the people that liked his story, how he's talking to a bunch of people, I said I had to know more about Mike, and I thought it was going to be a great story to have in my podcast. Besides that, this is the second or the third time we shoot with Mike already. We have so many problems trying to shoot this podcast, but I think it's going to be the best podcast because of that. So here we are. Mike, I want you to share your story. Tell me why you left the U.S. and why Mexico.
Well, originally, I got a job opportunity down here and I decided to take it. Also, at the same time, I was becoming an empty nester. I have 2 adult children and they were still living with me. And so I decided to take the opportunity. I sold my house, I sold my car, I sold my belongings. I arrived in Mexico literally with a couple suitcases and a cat and a dog.
That's quite interesting, right? Because not many people make that decision. Usually people plan things out, they spend time trying to make a decision. But for you, it was just, I'm leaving, I'm going to try this job, and that's it. Which I think that's the mind of an entrepreneur, right? I believe personally too that the more you plan things out, is usually the chances of not happening are higher, at least in my opinion. When I want something, just do it. There had to be a little bit of common sense or planning, but not long-term planning and stuff like that. So, anyway, so once you're in Mexico, right? You got to Mexico, obviously different culture, different language. How was your, how did you deal with that, right? You're used to the United States, the commodities and all the technology and all the fancy stuff, and now you're in Mexico, which Mexico, I want to say, is a beautiful place. Never been, but I watched videos. You told me, I saw your videos, amazing. But the commodity and the way you live in the U.S. is way different. So I just want to know, how was that experience for you?
The actual adapting to Mexico was fine because I was excited to be here and I wanted to be here, right? Where other people, like for instance, deportees, they end up being here without their choice. They just end up being left on the other side of the border. So for me, I think adapting was okay. The hardest part was in the beginning was language. And then also I needed to work. I'm not rich. I wasn't retired. So I needed to actually make money. And so in order to do that, I had to finish up all my government appointments, not knowing Spanish, and do all that immediately while also trying to set up a home for myself and get that situated all simultaneously at the same time. So it was a lot, at first, but eventually, it all worked out.
Right. So, how did you deal with this is something happened to a lot of people that they migrate, is that it's kind of like a divorce, right? When you divorce someone, you in this case, you divorce in your country, your culture, where you were born. How do you deal with that, right? Because now, did you miss the U.S.? It was easy for you to put it behind, like, okay, I'm done with this, I'm done with the U.S., or you struggle with the idea of not going back or having your life in a different place. How was your thought process with that?
I think part of it was my desire to assimilate, and that helped immensely. Like, not so much to just forget the US altogether and forget the fact that I'm a US citizen, but more to try and adapt as quickly as possible to my new world, to the
Right.
new language, to the new way of doing things, and just accepting things. And that wasn't always so easy. There were moments right in the beginning, like everybody has, where, I may have cried here and there. I may have, like,
Right.
had some issues, just kind of struggling to adapt, but they were very temporary, of course, general culture shock kind of things. But
Right.
a little bit of depression at one point, when you're trying to do all this stuff, and in the beginning it feels so overwhelming because you're having to do things a completely different way than you're sort of used to doing things. And then realizing too that the US is extremely convenient, where Mexico is not convenient. It's it's a different world.
Right. And in the US, when you call, let's say, I think we have two different languages that we speak in the US, Spanish and English. So when you call, you can choose Spanish or English, but in Mexico, you didn't have that, right?
No, not too many. Some companies offer that, but not many. Yeah.
Right. Here in Louisiana, where I live, is French.
Yeah.
So at the airport, or, when the welcome signs are in French, and when you call to pay your power bill, it's either English, Spanish, or French.
Oh.
Yeah. So anyways, I one thing I noticed, you say something important, that you wanted to learn the language and adapt to the culture quickly. That's something that I recommend to anybody that wants to migrate. And I noticed this, especially in the US, where people have some kind of resistance to adapt to a new language, a new culture. The reason why I'm talking to you in English today, even if it's not perfect, is because I put a lot of effort on learning the language. Because first time when I arrived, people tell you Americans are no good, or some tell you Americans are good. But the only way to find out about how they are is by learning the culture and speaking to them, right? I wanted to have my own conclusions about that. And I learned and I push myself to learn the language. So I think what you're doing right now, pushing yourself to learn Spanish and learn the Mexico way, that's the right way to do. That's what everybody should do to any country that migrate, right? Don't force that country to change the way you do things. You learn those ways, right? Because you're going in there. So that's a great move. So tell me about your job, right? Because you had this job, and now you obviously you don't speak the language. New job in Mexico. How was that for you? How challenging was that for you, or wasn't?
Where I was lucky, I had half of my coworkers actually spoke English, so that was helpful. The other half did not, but there were moments where I was in a situation where I had to fake it till I made it, right? Like, just pretend that I knew what that person was talking about and try and focus on that. But sometimes, and luckily it all worked out in the past, but there are moments until today, like, I'm not fluent, right? So sometimes people will tell me something, I understand most of it, maybe 80 to 90%, but there's some missing pieces there that I may not fully understand. And so once I get past that, I think life will be a lot easier. But it's been 4 years, right? And so even for 4 years, it takes time to learn a language.
But at this point in your life, you can say that you already know another language. Maybe you're not fluent, but you know another language. Most people don't. And that's a great skill to have, because now you're bilingual. Something I learned from my traveling experience, because I travel as much as I can. So when you go to Europe, just so you know, if you ever go there, you can use English or Spanish to talk to people. Something that happened to me in Germany really quick. I was at this restaurant, and the person is like, "You have an accent. Where are you from?" I'm like, "I'm from the U.S. I live in the U.S., but I was born in Argentina, so I'm Argentinian." He's like, "So why are you speaking English?" I don't know. But when you live in a country where being you is a little bit tough, right? You gotta watch where you speak Spanish, who speaks Spanish. You constantly checking yourself that you speak in English and you try to blend into the culture as much as you can. And I'm going to a country like Germany. I'm thinking I had to speak English. Not even German. I'm speaking English all over the place.
Right.
This guy say, "You don't need to. You can speak Spanish." And you'd be surprised a lot of people who speak Spanish or other languages, especially in Europe. I'm like, well, that gave me another advantage because I was lost for 19 hours the first time because I rented a car. So I'm gonna try Spanish. So I got to this McDonald's, and this is the end of the story. Got to the McDonald's, and I'm lost. And I said, "Sir, excuse me, do you speak English?" He said, "No." "Do you speak Spanish?" He said, "Yes." Wow, I'm surprised. Someone told me to ask both languages and that I would find people either or 50-50.
Yeah.
I'm like, great. And yeah, he knew Spanish and he gave me directions. So that's an advantage you have right now. You speak two languages, and you should be proud of that. And I think that's probably why Mexico people like you too, because I saw your videos, and is that the effort of learning, appreciating the culture. Everybody's proud of their own culture, right? Like Americans or Mexicans or Argentinians. And when someone new goes to the country and admire what they have, they're gonna love that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I read on your story that you at one point you almost lost your flight because of the language, right? That put a lot of stress on you, and because telling the story is one thing, but living it is another. So when you say about stressful time or even crying and stuff, imagine you're at the airport almost losing your flight. How was that for you, and how do you deal with it?
That was pretty stressful, and that was the problem, not knowing sometimes. And I've learned too, there's different types of Spanish. There's mechanic Spanish, there's airport Spanish, there's
Right.
restaurant Spanish. So the regular
Right.
Spanish terms that I was used to using did not apply if I was in an unfamiliar situation. So that one day I was at the airport, I was in Mexico City of all places. Mexico City airport is huge.
Right.
And so they love to change the gates. I've learned this later after being there a few times that almost anytime they tell me that my gate is
Right.
gate 6, it's not going to be gate 6. They're going to change it on me at some point, and I need to know and listen to the loudspeaker for when they tell me where my gate is. Anyway, but at that point it was my first trip there, and so I was waiting at the gate and there weren't many people there, so I didn't think much of it.
Right.
But they changed the gate and people left, and again,
Right.
sat there. I didn't know any better. And I'm like, where are those people going? They just sort of sauntered off. And so I
Right.
had to wait. And then eventually somebody had said something to me, asked me what I was waiting for. And I said, oh, I'm waiting for this flight. And then she says, no, they changed it. It's like gate 20 something. So I had to run down the hallway. Luckily, they were still loading the last few people. So I was able to just climb on the plane and go. But yeah, that could have ended badly had I not had that person not say something to me. I would have just sat there not known any better, even though they had announced it multiple times.
Sometimes we are sitting at home and wanted to do something, and we start thinking about the pros and cons of doing something, and we put a lot of thinking into it. But you just go and do it, and even in a stressful situation like that you were, you find a solution. Something happened. Things, if you set your mind to do something, you're gonna have those downtimes, but at the end, you're gonna figure it out. You're gonna solve the problem. Something positive is gonna happen. You're gonna meet the right person on the way. You might meet, 10 bad people, but you probably meet 20, 100 good people that will help you. It's just making the step, right, or leaving. The reason why there's a different language for different environment when you're learning a new language, because you were saying that happened to me. Like, my first job, here in the United States, I work for a body shop. And I learned the vocabulary for everything about a car, like what a hood is, what a bumper is. And I also learned how they call it in England. They call it bony, wing. They have, the screen instead of the windshield. They have different names. But when I left that job, I wanted to do something better with my life. I went back to college, and I became a technology engineer, right? When I decided to do that, I couldn't understand a damn thing because, like you say, you learn different vocabulary for different environment, right? So, even when you go to the doctor, you're gonna get a haircut, right? You learn new words, new things.
Yep.
And then there's a street language, because one thing is proper English or proper Spanish, and then street language, which is even more confusing.
Especially here.
Right. So even for me, like Argentina, if I go there, we don't use the same slang.
Nope.
So I will say that I know some because of the United States. There's a lot of Mexican here, but if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't know. And by the way, Argentinians say lluvia, calle, and Mexican would say lluvia or calle.
Uh-huh.
Right? So we say lluvia,
Uh-huh.
and if you don't know the language well, it will throw you off.
Yep.
What is lluvia?
And
Right.
Los Otros here at all. Like, not
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But anyways, so moving to the rest of the story, how's your family dealing with this? Are they fine? They happy for you? They miss you? They ask you to come back? Do you miss them? Because that's another struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's where I'm very fortunate. I live in a tourist town. So people want to come here because there's also a vacation involved. So I don't get the chance to miss my friends and family because they're always here. I have a parade of people always here visiting and wanting to go to the beach and wanting to do these things. Where the struggle is I'm not here on vacation, right? They are, so I have to work.
Right.
But beyond that, I'm very fortunate that I chose to live in a very popular tourist destination so that, it's very easy for people to come visit me.
That's also great because Mexico is so close to the U.S., so it's easy to go back and forth. If you have a legal status, if you're legal, that's
Yes.
not a problem, right? If you're
Yep.
not legal, then I understand. So we're talking about legal people.
That's
They
a
can go
privilege.
back.
Yeah.
Most of them, the American friends that want to retire in Mexico, because there are quite a few, they choose Mexico because it's next to the U.S. and they can go back and see their family, grandkids, whatever, and it's cheaper because the flights are cheaper, right?
Mhm.
And like I say, if you're legal, it's easy to go in and out.
Yeah.
Do you plan to go back to Mexico or to go back to the U.S.? Sorry, to go back to the U.S. or Mexico is going to be your forever home?
I think Mexico is going to be my forever home. I have no plans to even visit the U.S. in 2025 or 2026 at all. But no, the longer I'm away, the less I want to go back. And I never really wanted to. And let me tell you that desire to go back was extremely small. So it's even smaller now. It's minuscule. But yeah, I just, other than my children that I miss, but.
Right.
I would rather them come live here one day as opposed
Right.
to me go there. But yeah, it's just the US has changed so much. The culture and just the way things are. I don't feel like I relate as much anymore to the culture in the US. And maybe that's why I get along with the Mexican population so well, is because
Right.
I more here to the people than I do there.
And Mike, what I was gonna say is that you've been in Mexico. You have 4 years in Mexico already.
Yeah,
4 years. Yeah. So I had 30 in the United States, and more than 30 years. And I do miss Argentina a lot. I do, but I haven't been able to go as frequently because when it's far, and tickets are what, maybe depends on what season, over $1,000 a
Yeah.
pop. So
Uh,
yeah, it's expensive. Now that's just flying tickets. Imagine going there, food and everything else. So another question I want to ask you, have you suffered any discrimination in Mexico at all? Either cultural or, color, whatever, right?
Honestly, only online, only in my content, because I'm a content creator. So only in my content and in my lives that I do is the only time I ever suffer any sort of anything. In person, never. And I always tell people, if you're nice and respectful here, you will get that back. It's like a mirror, right? But if you're not nice and respectful, you will also get that back. So
Right.
luckily I'm not a Karen, right? So I never am disrespectful to anybody. I'm always
Right.
usually in a good mood, right? So I never have an issue.
No, that's good. Like in every country, there's always stupid people, right? They happen. So yeah, and this is why it's important to learn the culture and the language. And I tell you, because in the US, I can make my own judgment about how people are. And I can tell you that honestly, same as you, I never, at least on my face, I never suffered any discrimination at all. Never. Not even one time. I know people did and they had bad experiences. It never happened to me. But even if it happened, it was not on my face. And if it happened to my face, um, it's just one person, maybe two, not everybody. That's why when you get to know people by talking to them.
Yeah.
And having those conversations and learning about each other. You can only do that by learning the language or learning the culture. It's as simple as that.
Exactly.
Anything else you want to share, Mike? I think your story is great. I like what you're doing. I like how people are following you, how people are, you have an amazing personality. Mike was very kind to give me 3 opportunities to do a podcast, which we had so many problems. Even today, we were like back and forth. It's not going to work. So let me try this, let me try that. And we finally did it. So we deserve a lot of views for this. And you too, people need to follow you more, Mike. You have a lot of followers too. Very likable person, very kind, very patient. So you want to talk a lot about a little bit about your online experience and what you're doing with your platform, how that's going, because it looks like you're doing great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I originally set out because people would ask me regularly, what is it like to live in Mexico? That was a common question. What's it like? What's it like? What's it like? So I thought I would start a TikTok channel and kind of show people just everyday stuff, what life is like here every day. Not so much, there's plenty of content creators that do I walk my dog every morning on the beach with a cup of coffee. No one does that. Like those of us who live here, we've got too much to do. I don't have time to walk my dog on the frickin' beach. So So I wanted to show more the real life here. And then eventually it sort of grew into something different because a group of people started to identify with my content that I did not expect. I mostly thought it would be more for the gringo population to kind of educate them
Right.
on Mexico. And I also wanted to show Mexico in a positive light because there's just so much negativity about Mexico and Mexicans on the other side of the border, right? That's all they get in the news is the negative stuff. So I wanted to show positive. But Mexican-Americans and deportees have really identified with my content and have been reaching out. So my content is starting to change a little bit and is geared more toward being helpful and informational and educational for them, because there's a lot of Mexicans, especially that are living in the U.S., whether they were born in Mexico or their parents immigrated and they were born in the U.S., that are scared. They are not aware they don't know Mexico at all. I've never been to Mexico ever. And so they're faced with a situation of possibly needing or wanting to return, and they kind of need, more information. And so luckily they have my last 4,000 followers have been almost entirely Mexican, which I love and I'm here for it. So yeah, so it's been neat building the community.
That's awesome. Look, imagine if you go back 4 years ago when you got your briefcase and your suitcase to leave, you did not picture all this stuff. And this is how it plays out, right? So when you just got to go do things and try things, be conscious, be conscious. put some thoughts into it, think a little bit, but don't give it a lot of room to think about stuff. Just go ahead and do it, right? This is not a life advice by any means, but look at Mike. He took a chance and changed his life, and now people are following him. Who would know that 4 years later or 5 years later, Mexican was going to follow his content because they're being deported to Mexico, right? It's just an American citizen in Mexico, guiding me in Mexico. This is great. This is awesome. And people should not be afraid. I know there's a lot of Mexicans that never been in Mexico. They worry about it. There's nothing to worry about because you might live with less, but humans are made to survive anywhere. We're survival species, and we can survive anywhere. Now, luxury, that's a different story, right? But you will survive. You will find a lot of good people, like Mike, for example, a lot of good Mexicans that will help you, and that's how life is. It's about taking chances and opportunities. I think I watched the other day one of the videos where you were talking about people don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo in Mexico that they do in the United States, because in the United States everything's turned into a profit. It's all about money. Yeah, and that's why, right? In other countries, people don't celebrate their Independence Day or whatever it is as much as they do in the U.S. But in the U.S., every celebration is people make millions and millions or billions of dollars.
Valentine's Day.
Right. That's why you make money with everything. So that's why Mexico is probably low key, not much of a celebration. But I can relate to that because I'm from Argentina. It's the same in Argentina. We don't have a huge celebration. We're not just like patriot. We just don't throw a lot of money into it. Yeah. That's all. Right.
Yeah, here the celebration is actually about the celebration, actually about food and family and the purpose of celebration, not so much buying items for.
Right. Well, Mike, I'm happy for you, for everything is happening to you. You deserve that. I think you're going to be great. Just follow your heart. Just let things happen. Right. And I'm happy to have you here. I appreciate you for the opportunity you gave me, especially trying 3 or 4 times. I'm thinking he's going to hate me. He's going to be done with this. And no, here we are. So, and I think the podcast came out great. So, I have nothing else. Great story, and really happy to have you. Thank you so much for helping me with this. And I hope everything goes well. And I hope I can interview again, like in another 3 or 4 months, we can do another interview and see how you're doing and how well you're doing. Maybe we both have successful platform and we both are doing fantastic. I think we're going to be doing great for sure.
I too.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. And have a good one.
You too.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.